I start to open up the water heater, I get the electrical turned off, I start to replace the element, and at the very top where the water is coming into the water heater, there's a shutoff valve, and it was extremely corroded, so I was trying to get it shut. My wife's standing there next to me. She's going to be my helper for the night. Our 75-year-old tenant is sitting on the couch, and while I'm trying to get the valve shut, the pipe that goes into the top of the water heater breaks off. It's just gushing out water.
What type of renovations did you end up doing on it?
Yeah, so again, it was mostly cosmetic stuff. So we painted the cabinets. They were a little bit rougher, so we used some patchwork just from the dogs and cats that had been scratching them. So we painted them white. We also replaced some of the fixtures in the bathroom as well as in, the kitchen, some of the different fixtures there. We replaced some broken tile as well as trim, some different things. And really the biggest thing, so we'd done our inspection early on and we saw, hey, this electrical panel, it's in bad shape, it needs to be upgraded. When we bought the place before we moved in, we already started getting quotes from a couple different people just because we knew we'd have to replace it. At the time, we were planning on just waiting until we moved in and then doing the fixes at that point instead of trying to bother the people, because we knew we'd be moving in at some point. And with the 2-2 side, so it was a little bit rough. One day we had an issue with the water heater. It wasn't cooling properly, or it wasn't heating the water properly. And our tenant reached out and said, hey, I've got no hot water. Can you come take a look? So I came, took a look. I talked to my wife's grandpa, who is like the most handy of all people, like just knows how to do pretty much anything. Grew up on a farm, like can do anything. So he walked me through like, hey, if it's a hot water heater, it's likely the thermostat and the elements that need replaced. I was like, hey, I can watch enough YouTube videos and I can figure this out. I'll go and replace it. So I go in, I start to open up the water heater, I get the electrical turned off, I start to replace the element, and at the very top where the water is coming into the water heater, there's a shutoff valve, and it was extremely corroded, so I was trying to get it shut. My wife's standing there next to me. She's going to be my helper for the night. Our 75-year-old tenant is sitting on the couch, and while I'm trying to get the valve shut, the pipe that goes into the top of the water heater breaks off, and it's just gushing out water, just spewing all over the place, and it's starting to flood a little bit. And our tenant's like, there's water coming into the living room, and it's coming out from under the stairs, and all this stuff. So it was like, worst case scenario in that moment. I was freaking out. My wife was freaking out. Like, what do we do? And eventually, I was able to get the valve shut off, and then we were able to get the water all soaked up and use a wet dry vac, and had a friend come over to help me and got everything cleaned up, got the fans going. So luckily that part wasn't an issue. We had already done the due diligence. We had a plumber come and fix the connection, which that was only a couple $100. We didn't realize at the time it wasn't actually the water heater that was having issues. It was the electrical panel and the specific breaker. We knew from the inspection, this will need to get fixed. The previous owner had tried to start a new panel and had started running some wires and some breakers over to it, but it was definitely he had been doing it on his own and definitely not the code or anything. So all right, we'll need to get it fixed, but it came sooner than we were expecting. But again, we were able to have those quotes before it came down to the crunch time of all right, we need to get this fixed if she's going to have hot water. And luckily, we had 3 quotes before we got it replaced, and one quote was for $10,000. The next one was for $5,000, and then the final one was for $1,000, which he was a good referral from other local real estate investors who everybody I asked, they said, yeah, this is the electrician we use. He owns rental properties. He understands, and he does a great job. And so we ended up going with him, which, in hindsight, if we hadn't paid attention to the inspection, if we hadn't figured we're going to need to replace this at some point, we could have easily ran into that issue and it felt crunch time and just gone with the first offer or the first bid that we got, and ended up spending $5,000 or $10,000, which would have been crazy, instead of taking the time to prep for it. So
isn't it crazy how different contractors will have such wide ranges of prices? I think a lot of people don't really realize it. Maybe homeowners might realize, and homeowners like to cut corners and shop around, so maybe people that own homes, but if you're a renter, you have no idea about this type of thing. But it's just goes to show you what taking the extra steps to try to find a better deal, how much money it can save you. And there are a lot of ways to save money in real estate and to make money in real estate, but one of the biggest ones is not overpaying for these types of fixes, because it can get very, very expensive, like you said. So I do also want to kind of ask you, so along these lines, right? So one of the segments of the show that I do when I do interviews is called an overrated, underrated segment, right? Mm-hmm. And it's some topic related to real estate. In this case, I want to ask you about inspections, where I ask the guest, I say, hey, do you think inspections in real estate, and this is the question I want to ask you, do you think inspections especially for new real estate investors, when they're looking during the due diligence period, looking at the property before they close on it, how important do you think they are? Do you think they're overrated, underrated, or do you think most people approach them the right way? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I would say absolutely underrated. Unless you're a handyman and you worked in construction your whole life and maybe your family does it, I'd say 90% of people, they've lived in apartment complexes or they've lived at home where they've never had to do the maintenance, especially in an apartment complex. Like, you just call up your property manager and they send somebody to take care of it. So an inspection, it really walks through every single little thing. And I mean, they get into the details for even the nuts and bolts of the electrical panel and all sorts of little minor details that it really gives you a full idea. And especially if you can look at it, and that's what we did. We got it. We talked to my wife's grandpa and we said, okay, here's all the things we're seeing. And then we pretty much just priced it out and we said, okay, here's part of the cost. And that's also stuff that we negotiated when we were doing our contracts with the seller, reducing our closing costs. So we looked at it and said, hey, we know it's going to cost X amount for these repairs. Can we reduce our closing costs? If we had skipped over the inspection, or if we had thought hey, this is just a paper to essentially say, yes, the house is viable, mm-hmm. instead of really saying here's all the known issues and here's how much, you can plan out how much it's going to cost to repair. That saved us massively, just because we know all the larger CapEx that's going to be coming in the near future, and we're able to make sure that we start saving towards those ahead of time.
Hey guys, tap or click the screen in the corner for the next house hacking video you should watch. And if you want to go deeper with me and ask me your questions about house hacking or being a rental property owner, join me in my free private house hack mastery group on school.com. I post exclusive content and bonuses in that group, and you can connect with me and other like-minded investors. Also, if you're just getting started and thinking about buying your first house hack, grab your free copy of my house hack success checklist. Both links are in the description below.